Okay, there we are. Thanks, Navid. You're actually now the host. Hopefully you can still hear me. We are recording this part of the session, but not actually the Q&A, where it's Chatham House rule as usual. Just a quick reminder that your peer group events return next month, and this conversation is a mix of all three. So please do hit chat to everyone or just to me, and I'll gather up the questions as we go along. I think Navid's planning to speak for around about 30 minutes or so, see how we go, and then there's Q&A afterwards with a hard finish at 5 o'clock. So without further ado, by popular demand from the HR Directors WhatsApp group, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Navid, who's the Global Head of HR Group Finance at Vodafone and an executive coach in his own right, in which guise he's specialised in partnering with the leaders on executive transition, maximising leadership impact and high-performing teams. And he's drawing on an HR career with a lot of blue-chip experience, Roche, GE and Adidas, amongst others. So Navid, the floor is yours. Thank you ever so much for doing that. Welcome everybody, and Navid, over to you.
Thank you so much, Richard, and hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, from wherever you're dialing in. I assume most of us are somewhere in the UK, and looking forward to the session, and I hope you will get value out of this. If I had one goal for our session today, is that some of you will avoid repeating some of the mistakes that I have certainly made during my career as an HR leader, in order to try to improve engagement and enhance productivity. So what I'm going to share with you is partially what is out there available to all of us. So this is information that is either public knowledge or shared with some of the big consulting companies out there. But also what I'm also going to share with you is something that's really specific to Vodafone, and this is something that I am very passionate about, and something that I want to share with you all, to also showcase how some of the theory actually works out in practice. And then towards the end, we got what I titled as insights. So these are things that we can all look at and potentially take away and apply back in our own kind of organization. As Richard said, I would have to apologize for the fact that whilst we are recording this, we will just hit pause on the Vodafone stuff. I will share everything I have with you, so it's in the spirit of full transparency with you as fellow HR leaders, and yet I really don't want this to be recorded and potentially, you know, finding its way to some other audiences. So what does our agenda look like today? We're going to look at what engagement is. There's so many different definitions out there. We're going to have a look at the business case for employee engagement, why we do believe that engagement actually matters, as well as looking at current trends in employee engagement. What is the latest thinking? And there has been some good work coming out there. Before we look at Vodafone as a practical example, and finish the presentation today with insights and what I titled as employee engagement warning signs, many of which I feel guilty of having committed myself during the many years in HR. So I have seen very different definitions on engagement, but one of the better definitions I found is to go back to the actual individual components of it. So the one definition I particularly like is this one. So if you look at the different types of commitment, one is titled the rational commitment, and the other one is the so-called emotional commitment. These commitments essentially occur during 4 focal points. The first two is a mixture between the day job of an employee and the team that they are a part of. And the other two are related to the direct line manager and the organization of which they are a member of. So these 4 are what this organization is referring to as the focal point of commitment. This then results in 2 different outcomes. One is so-called discretionary effort. So this is the willingness of someone to go over and above beyond what is considered to be the call of duty. I think, you know, that the times that we are in right now are probably one of the best examples of, you know, if you do have a highly engaged workforce, These are really, truly exceptional times, and yet ideally, you should see some return on that investment from an engagement point of view during a time like this. So there are no manuals out there, there are no booklets, there are no best practices on how to deal with COVID and permanent lockdown. And yet, if you have a highly engaged workforce, the idea is that people are going to put in the extra effort to make sure that things keep moving and that the organization keeps performing as they have before. The other outcome of that is retention. So ideally, in a highly engaged organization, there's also some real benefit, as in that there's a higher intent to stay. So, I support finance as an HR leader globally, and I think the City of London is particularly a very tough place for finance talent to stay in just in one place, because they're the big banks, they are the fintechs, they are the big four, and everyone essentially looking for similar, or if not the same, talent in finance. So the question is, what is it that you offer to your people that makes them want to stay a little longer and a little more engaged in your organization versus maybe the other organization that even pays them more or offers them better prospects career-wise? So if all of this works in a good manner, then this results in what we all know in HR that ultimately has an impact on performance, on retention. There's good studies out there showing that organizations that are highly engaged from a workforce point of view have a better revenue, higher profitability, and ultimately better customer satisfaction. And that is the real gold mine. So this is the simple business case for employee engagement, if you will, on a one page. But then there is more than that, and so one idea is to look at this study that was conducted by Boston Consulting Group. So what they did is to interview over 4,200 senior leaders to say, if you look 5 to 10 years out, what are the capabilities that you believe you will need in the future? And the other question was, what is your level of confidence about the capability that you have in-house right now as we speak? And as you can see, these are all people-related topics. And if I look at enhancing employee engagement, it didn't quite make it to the red zone. But what is quite clear here already is the fact that a lot of the leaders felt that this is one of the key topics that are going to be very important in the future. And at the same time, they didn't really put it further down here to say, and I have all the confidence I need from not just HR, but from the leadership in my organization that we are going to get this right. So for me, that is one good reason why we should be focusing on engagement. The second reason is sort of referring to the definition that I gave, which is, if you look at it from a business point of view, from an employee or an organization point of view, there are all the right indicators to demonstrate that a highly engaged organization has a better business results, has a greater readiness and a better attrition rate, and ultimately leading to an organizational culture and anticipating things that are coming to the organization. And finally, if somebody wanted to really get into the numbers, there are very, very good studies out there to show how actually, if you were just to look at the top end and the bottom end in terms of engagement levels, how the difference is financially articulated. So whether it's profit margin, revenue growth, customer advocacy, productivity, and so on, so you name it. So I think this should really be a good reason for all of us to look into the topic of engagement in order to enhance employee engagement. So let's start with disengagement first. So what if we don't get this right? And I think this is a very telling picture, because this is what happens. I used to work as a very young chap. I used to work in Burger King, and I was going to school back then. And I used to have a line manager who said, "Navid, I only expect one thing from my staff, and that is I want them to think around the corner." And what he meant by that is of course, we all had a job description, we all had something to do. But what he really, really rated and appreciated is not just doing your job, but really thinking one step ahead, really thinking about the next thing that may be coming. And if everyone were to do that, that will be enough in his playbook to have a more engaged and a more kind of motivated workforce. There's a real cost to this as well. So if you were to look at the different studies out there, and you can go by geography, you can go by country, and you can look at all the all the data that is out there to suggest that you have a percentage of the population that is either sitting in what is referred to as the neutral zone and what is considered to be the disengaged zone. So if you combine the two of these, it typically makes more than half of the population in some of the more developed countries, and that's quite shocking to me. So if you look at it, of course, there's little to some things you can do about the so-called disengaged population. They are either disgruntled for a reason, they have been too long, maybe too comfortable, or for whatever reason, they really don't buy into anything that the management and leadership have to say. They don't agree with the company policies. They don't agree with the direction of the organization. They have 10 good reasons why they are acting the way they are acting. But where for me the real potential sits is in the so-called neutral zone. So these are people, if this